Hello and thanks for joining me. Now, the other day I was just minding my own business and my inbox started pinging and my social media and direct messages and all that sort of thing. People asking me what I think about the new OM system OM-1 camera. I was quite taken by surprise because I knew it was in the pipeline, but I don't really follow gear news that much, so I had no idea it was due out for announcement this week. And I wasn't exactly on the edge of my seat. Now, I started typing out a couple of replies, and I don't like to just respond glibly by saying, oh yes, you should definitely get it. So I think if people bother to write in, and bearing in mind that my channel has kind of become all about Olympus cameras for some reason, since I switched about 4 years ago, I do try and reply to people to answer their specific questions, but after dictating a couple of quite lengthy and detailed replies, I thought, look, let's just make a quick video to share my thoughts on it, and then if anybody still writes in, I can just refer them to this, because anything that isn't covered in this video I have no opinion on. Now, I switched to the Olympus EM1 Mark II, this very camera, about 4 years ago from Nikon D5500. Both were designed around being relatively lightweight. I've never been interested in full frame photography because of my hiking in the mountains. So a lot of people sort of tuned into my channel at that point and started following me because I was using Micro Four Thirds. So if you're one of those people, thank you very much indeed. So let me start with a short answer to most of the inquiries that I've been getting this week. Should I buy the OM-1? Well, yeah, if you've got the money and you just fancy it, you won't be disappointed. Absolutely not. But I think that for a lot of people, it's a lengthier decision than I just fancy it, so I'll buy it. So these are my thoughts on it. Firstly, I want to refer you to a guy called Eyre-Walker. He's got a YouTube channel. He's an adventure photographer, and he's the person who influenced me into buying this camera. So at the time, back in, I think it was the end of 2018, I was watching his stuff, and one of his videos, I looked at it and thought, that's the camera system for me. And to this day, if I ever bumped into him, I'd go up to him and say, Chris, thank you very much for that recommendation. I most certainly wouldn't be annoyed that he'd give me any sort of a bum steer. So he's put a video out about the OM-1. I'm going to put a link to it in the description below. But you need to bear in mind that he's biased because he was an Olympus ambassador, now an OM system ambassador. So bear that in mind. There's another video that I'm also going to link to by DPReview. They're completely system agnostic. They do a very in-depth review of all the features of this new camera. And to be fair, it's really objective. They're very complimentary about some of the excellent upgrades, but they're also pretty scathing about some aspects of it that OM system really should be thinking about in a flagship camera model. Not necessarily from the standpoint of is it better than their previous cameras, but when you look at the competition out there, there's room for improvement. So I'll link to that video as well, and that's going to tell you all the nitty-gritty details that you might need to know about. But the people that I'm really addressing in this video are those that are going, should I spend £2,000 on a new camera body? And I've got some very specific thoughts on that. And you're going to have to excuse me because I'm doing this in one take and I really need to refer to my notes, otherwise I'm going to forget something important. So yes, the first thing that I wanted to say was, if you're looking for a new camera body on the basis that it's going to create a jump in your quality of photography, if you're thinking that'll make me a better photographer, let me disabuse you of that right now and say it absolutely will not. Let me give you an example. If I look back through my own photo album here on Google Photos, I would challenge anybody who doesn't know at what point I switched my camera system to go back through this catalogue of images. And I probably take around about 100 to 150 a year, maybe 200 in a good year. So all the failures don't make this catalogue, but nobody would ever be able to scroll through it and say that's the point at which you change your camera system. The thing is, as a photographer, and certainly in my case, what you're looking to do is to gradually improve as you go along. And dropping a new camera system into that progress rarely makes any noticeable difference. So if you're thinking, I've got some money, I can just about stretch to it, my response to you would be to say, look, and bearing in mind, this is for landscapes. I'm a landscape photographer. I don't share opinions on other genres to any great degree because it would be wrong of me because I don't have much expertise. But I do know a bit about landscapes. And I would say to somebody, if you've got a bit of money floating about and you'd like to improve your photography, why don't you spend that money on learning? And you would get far more value for that experience. Go on a workshop with somebody, I don't know, Stuart McGlennan, for example. Go up to the Lake District. He runs amazing workshops. The key thing is, whilst he obviously knows the locations, he's a really, really good photographer. And you will learn so much, and you will see that improvement in your photography that you're looking for, if that's your reason for thinking about a new camera. If you're the other side of the pond, go and see, I don't know, Adam Gibbs, for example. People like that will give you great value for money. It kind of brings me on to my second point, that you'll get great memories from it. I mean, when I think back to my own photographic, I'm not going to say journey, don't say photographic journey there, I said it, that the highlights for me are certain photographs, they're certain shoots, certain locations, they're trips. I don't think back to the day when I unboxed this and I was really excited. Yeah, it was great. You know, it was like all my Christmases come together. I've got this fantastic new toy. But if someone says to me, what's one of your photographic highlights? It'll be an image. It'll be a location. It'll be a trip. And I think that if you think that a new camera will help you with that, you know, you're not going to. And it's something I ask people that come out with me when we're out working on their photography. I'll ask them about their influences and inspirations, and I'll say, you know, tell me about highlights for you. No one ever said, oh, I got a new camera. Never once. What they'll tell me about is a trip or a photograph. So maybe if you've got a bit of cash, think about going to, I don't know, the Italian Dolomites. Think about going to Iceland or Svalbard. Admittedly, you won't have any change out of the same sort of money it would cost you to buy this new camera. But trust me, 5 or 10 years down the road, that camera will just be all forgotten. It'll be gathering dust on a shelf because you'll have replaced it. But those memories, those photographs, that's what's important about landscape photography, for me anyway. Let's talk about the camera itself, though. To be honest, there are a couple of things that I think, for me, for landscapers, will be really useful. Firstly is the much higher resolution EVF and screen. That would be a big deal. Secondly, things like the improved processor, which has really good algorithms for things like handling noise, dynamic range, and the ISO range as well. So I could see those being really useful, low light, blue hour sort of photography. Those would be a plus for me, and certainly things that I would like to have in my existing camera body. A couple of downsides though, or not really downsides because they're really good, but much improved burst rates, pro capture rates, that sort of thing. The additional stop of stabilization goes up from actually 2 stops, from 5 stop IBIS to 7 stop IBIS. But if you add an Olympus lens with additional stabilization, you're up to 8 stops. But both of those really aren't relevant to me to any great degree, apart from, I mean, I use Pro Capture for seascapes where I want to time a wave hitting a rock perfectly. That's the only time I use it. I don't do a lot of wildlife stuff. Some pluses, some so what. But I think that the bottom line is that I probably will buy one. No, not anytime soon. I've had this, I think, about 4 years. It's so rugged. I've dropped this camera body half a dozen times, once onto tarmac, once onto rocks on a mountain top, once on the coast up on the north side of the island. I dropped it onto an angle of rock and it rolled down about 30 feet, bounced end over end, and it's got nicks and chips, but it still works. It's built like a tank. So I think what I'll probably do is wait until it eventually craps out and then I'll put it on the shelf as a nostalgic reminder of some great times, and I'll replace it with the OM-1 or whatever the OM-1 analog is at that point in time. But I think in the meantime, I know it won't improve my photography to change camera bodies, and the money that I've got is earmarked for some trips that are going to give me far more pleasure and memories than a new camera body would. So hopefully that answers all the messages that I haven't yet answered. And let me just check, is there anything I've forgotten? Oh yes, one thing. The Panasonic G8 is due out shortly. So when the specs of that come out, if you're shooting Micro Four Thirds and you've got a clump of Micro Four Thirds format lenses and you're thinking about an upgrade to your camera body, that might be worth a look as well. And I'm willing to bet it'll give the OM-1 a run for its money. But I'm going to leave it there for this one. Thank you ever so much for joining me. I really hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have and you want to see some Micro Four Thirds photography, why not subscribe now and join me next time? Cheers.